My name is Rebecca Lund. I'm a postdoctoral fellow in the Marie Curie UNIKE project here at Aarhus University, and I'm located in the Department of Educational Anthropology. The research I'm doing for my postdoc is a continuation of what I did for my PhD. It's a continuation and a development of it. I finalized my PhD in August 2015. And I have kind of two focus areas. One is to develop the sociological method of inquiry and ontology of the social called institutional ethnography, which is a form of inquiry that looks at the social organization of everyday life, or how particular local settings are hooked into translocal operations and processes. And I've kind of worked on developing that in order to explore empirically and theoretically the gendered and intersecting nature of changing academic work in the context of neoliberal reforms and the marketization of academic labor. I empirically was at that time for my PhD looking at a particular university in Finland, but I'm now also involved in other projects where I can use the data from Norway and New Zealand to also look at these things, and hopefully we'll also get a chance to look more at the Danish cases in that kind of those kind of areas. And more particularly, I was looking at how the ideal academic was constructed in particular career systems. And how there was an emergence of what I called an academic boasting culture, and how particular discourses of love arise in and around the academic work of writing. And my findings now, relate, kind of move between these two focus areas in a way. On the one hand, I have institutional ethnography. I showed how the conceptual apparatus of institutional ethnography could be used to bridge socialist and postmodernist feminism, because it allowed me concepts that could bridge micro and macro institutions, which could bridge ideology and discourse, or the concepts of ideology and discourse, which we usually consider as being quite different because they're based in different philosophical traditions, Marxist or Foucauldian. And then the material and relational, which also follows from the discursive and ideological focus. So are we, on the one hand, I would see people as both being embedded in gendered and intersecting relations. They're embedded in discourses and ideologies, but they're also reproducing these, and that's what makes it both a material and a relational exploration, or an exploration into both aspects. And then I wanted to show the way, and I've showed the way in which studying or looking at gender and intersectionality should not only be should not be explored as variables, but should be explored as practices. So how do people actually do these things, do gender in their everyday life? And how can you explore that ethnographically within the context of academia? And then I showed the emergence of a new gender discourse within the context of changing academia, and particularly the emergence of what I call global masculinity, which is a notion of masculinity which was developed by another feminist thinker, but for exploring the corporate world. But I showed that with the marketization of academia and with the changing forms that academia has taken, so are also gender is taking new forms. And then finally, how local settings, disciplines and departments are being reshaped by these translocal standards and notions of quality and excellence in academia, and how that also leads to a discursive representation of academia as being interested in knowledge production and therefore also diversity and equality of various forms of epistemic focuses or ways in which you could produce knowledge. How that is kind of, on the one hand, being a way in which academia is being presented discursively, but what actually happens is that it downplays the institutional intention, which is to increase its position on international standardized lists of quality. So I showed how these kind of struggles happen between what the university should actually be. What is it we want this university to be, and how do we define it, and who gets to define it? And how is that also a deeply gendered process that is part of reproducing and strengthening forms of inequality within academia?